Bill Clinton led the Democratic Party as a nominee and then president before much of the party trekked to the left on welfare, trade, and criminal justice reform.
And by only giving AOC 60 seconds to speak, the DNC seems to be trying to cement that Bill Clinton-like future for the party. Piece from The Cut says, quote, "It's one thing to try to open up a Big Tent. It's another to actually let people on the left and in the next generation into that tent in some meaningful way. Instead, Democrats are treating progressives and young people as cater waiters there to serve hors d'oeuvres to the Republicans, billionaires, and former office holders who are the real guests." Former advisor to Bill and Hillary Clinton, Richard Goodstein, joins us now to give his take on all of this. Great to see you, Richard.
Good to see you, Richard.
Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
First of all, just react to that quote. I mean, we've had all kinds of Republicans. We had Kasich. We had Colin Powell. We're going to have Michael Bloomberg. Of course, both Clintons will be represented. And then this rising wing of the party, which is AOC and the other members of the squad, and, you know, some of the insurgent progressive candidates who just won in stunning upsets this election cycle, they're basically completely absent from the conversation. What do you make of that? Is that an intentional choice? Is it the right choice?
Look, Bernie Sanders got a very prominent role on night one, and to his credit, came out full-throatedly in support of Joe Biden. I think as much as anybody, that younger generation of activists looks to him, and he sent the signal, which he didn't do 4 years ago, look, do everything you can to get Joe Biden elected. So was this a slight of the younger crowd? Look, they had that interesting montage of 17 relatively young Democratic leaders last night give the keynote. That was kind of an effort to incorporate a younger group.
But none of them were progressive. They were all like, you know, Connor Lamb, people who had endorsed Joe Biden early, basically was what qualified them as rising stars. So what I'm saying is not just about, yes, the youthful next generation, but, you know, there's a lot of people who voted for Bernie Sanders in this election cycle and last election cycle. This is where most of people in the party under 40 are ideologically aligned. And it feels like there's no real attempt to reach out to that group. I mean, is that ultimately a political mistake here, too?
Well, first of all, I disagree with the notion. If you look at the polls, Biden's actually doing quite well among younger voters right now relative to Trump.
Yeah, but he didn't in the primary, obviously, right. Richard.
Yeah, but he clobbered Bernie Sanders in the primary, okay?
Right, but not among young people. So if you're trying to win, those are the people that stayed home last time and you're very upset about. And it seems like similar mistakes are being made again about basically assuming you don't need that group. You don't need to excite them. They have no other choice, so they have to vote for Joe.
I don't think it's a question of not having any other choice. I think the issues, presumably, are what's going to speak to young people. If they care about climate change, if they care about health care, if they care about racial inequality, if they care about economic justice, this is not a close call. If they are indifferent and are perfectly happy with another 4 years of Donald Trump, yes, they will stay home. If they care about those issues, this is not a close call for them.
So let me ask you something, Richard. I want to go back to something you said earlier, where you famously, you've come on our show, you've said Bernie Sanders didn't do enough to get Hillary Clinton elected in 2016. So you are satisfied now at this point with Bernie's acquiescence to Joe Biden at the DNC?
I don't think it's look, I think there's a genuine fondness. I give Joe Biden credit, frankly, something neither Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton had it was in their wheelhouse, to have these kind of interpersonal relationships with colleagues. And I think what you're seeing from Bernie Sanders, and again, my hat is way off to him for being unabashed in his support, no holds barred, for Joe Biden. So yes, I'm saying go for it, Bernie. I'm sure they're going to use him as much as possible. And my guess is, again, if the polls are any indication right now, Biden's doing quite well among younger voters.
Right. And so the piece that I always object to, Richard, is you put it on the voters themselves. Like it's their fault that they didn't show up for Hillary, that they somehow owed it to her. And what I'm saying is that there was a mistake that was made in that campaign that I see being made again, where the expectation is, like you said, well, look, it's obvious. So they have to show up and vote for Joe. There's no other choice. And it's on them if they don't do so. Isn't there some responsibility on the campaign to try to reach out to these voters and make the case that you just made, that, look, you voted in the primary for Bernie Sanders because you cared about health care, because you cared about climate, and because you cared about other policy issues. Here's what we're bringing to the table. That's been utterly absent at the DNC. And there are parts that we've praised. I mean, I thought that Dr. Jill Biden did an excellent job in her speech last night. I didn't think that your former boss, Bill Clinton, did a great job, but we'll get to that in a moment. But that policy case, which is what young voters care the most about, is completely absent. And the leaders that they most respect, and yes, Bernie Sanders is one of them, but frankly, he's sort of passed the buck on to the next generation, are also completely absent. So isn't there some responsibility that falls on the campaign to energize that group of voters?
So, look, what would that look like? I would suggest what it looks like to reach out to younger voters is after the primaries are over, after Bernie and Joe have decided we're going to try to figure out from a policy standpoint what the path forward is. Everybody agrees that the Democratic platform is the most progressive ever. Okay, so if progressives aren't happy with that, what does the campaign need to do to reach out to them if they have the most progressive platform ever, and somehow or other what you're suggesting is, yeah, that's not good enough. We got to see more AOC. And let me just say one thing about the squad, if I can. Let's put it in perspective. There was one vote and one vote only when the squad stood up against the House leadership, and they lost 431-4 last year. I'm fond of all of them, but these are not people.
So Richard, but Richard, I mean, are you denying that there's a real energy in the party around that particular direction? Okay, so it seems like if you're building this big tent, if you're going to reach out to the John Kasichs of the world, who, by the way, 2/3 of Democratic primary voters were like, we're good on seeing John Kasich at the DNC, thanks very much. It seems like you would also want to reach out to this part of the party, which is the part that I am not seeing whatsoever. And I agree with you. I think Joe Biden is well positioned to win right now because people do feel like it's existential and like they don't have another choice to make. But I also know very well that just like last time around, if there's less enthusiasm and not enough young people show up, not enough working class black and brown people show up, it's going to all fall on the left again. It's all your fault that you didn't come out and vote for us when there hasn't been any real outreach made to that group. But I also wanted to ask you, what did you make of former President Clinton's speech last night? It was notably short. I think that was one of the things that people found really remarkable. But what did you think stood out about it?
Look, I think what he did, what Michelle Obama did, which was call out Donald Trump by name, which is something obviously presidents typically don't do about their successors or predecessors. And he went there. And he didn't try to get flamboyant. He didn't make a fuss because his time was however many minutes it was. He does better with the crowd, like most politicians do, than without. So honestly, I think he kind of got that job done. And let me just say one other thing. What we saw after last night is there is not a single person who ever ran for president or their spouse who's alive today who is supporting Donald Trump. Not one. And I think with Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, and that doesn't even take into account Colin Powell, having been Secretary of State to a Republican, and John Kasich, who was not only a conservative Republican governor, but was a Fox News host. Sorry, I understand, Krystal, that somehow or other you think you're seeing too much of that crowd. I think there are still swing voters out there, and I think if you're progressive, that shouldn't put you out, that you're actually reaching out to people who somehow or other last time were persuaded to vote for Donald Trump or third party.
Well, see, that's the interesting part, Richard, which is that some might actually look at that and say these are the people who are the ones who created the atmosphere in order for Donald Trump to be elected. And that also includes another one of your former bosses, Hillary Clinton. She'll be taking the stage tonight. What do you expect her to say as an affirmative case for Biden that she didn't say in 2016 and when she lost the election?
Well, I don't think you want to relitigate all the reasons that she lost. I'm happy to, but I don't think you have enough time. Look, I think she's going to speak. She probably will mark what nobody really did all that much last night, the 100th anniversary of the success of the suffrage movement. I think she said, if you watch that Hulu series on her, at the very end, she said, maybe I lit a fuse. And what we're seeing, and we saw it in 2018, and I think we're still seeing it, where women, certainly suburban women, but women generally, are now gravitating to the Democratic Party in ways we have never, ever seen. And let me just say one other thing about this business about about progressives. I think what we saw in 2018, and was certainly true for younger voters, is they weren't so carried away with every single Democratic House member who flipped a seat. They wanted desperately to vote against Donald Trump's party. They did, and they will do it again. I think all evidence is we're going to see a repeat of that.
I think that may be the case, but the bet was made in 2016 that Donald Trump being bad would be enough, and obviously it didn't work out. The last thing I wanted to ask you about, which is another point that Rebecca Traister made in a great piece over at The Cut, was that, while you point out there were a lot of women energized in 2018, there are a lot of first-time women candidates who won in 2018, by the way, none of whom, as far as I know, are featured at the DNC. But on the other hand, you have, in the Me Too era, Bill Clinton and Michael Bloomberg, both, credibly accused sexually harassers, getting prominent spots. How do you reconcile those things?
So I will take your or other people's ostensible interest in this the sexual charges when I hear a smidgen of that coverage of the 20 women that are waiting for their day in court against Donald Trump. His bragging about having grabbed women by the
Richard,
genitals.
I would flip that around because, we've certainly covered here. I know a lot of mainstream news has certainly covered those allegations as well.
No way.
But if Democrats are going to run on that issue, how do you reconcile that with still prominently featuring Bill Clinton and Michael Bloomberg?
I think Bill Clinton and Michael Bloomberg have shown themselves to be outstanding public servants. The economy never, ever did better in terms of job creation than it did under Bill Clinton. Let me just say one other thing in that regard, if I can. Donald Trump says the best economy ever. Look at the stats of gross domestic product. He is a quarter of what it was under FDR.
But hold on, Richard.
I'm not sure what that has to do with.
But hold on a second, because are you making essentially a utilitarian case here of we should ignore the Me Too transgressions because because he was a good leader and the economy was good, and so we should just pretend that stuff didn't happen, or it's not relevant, or we should forgive him for it? What is the case you're actually making?
I don't think anybody's saying we should forgive anything. And look, he's mortified by his own behavior. Again, if you watch that Hulu series, all I'm saying is that a reason to basically kind of throw somebody out of the party? I think the answer is no. I think people see him, warts and all. Look, I've heard a lot of people on cable news, sing Donald Trump's praises, but they can't, and think about all these women that we're talking about in Trump's case, and I guarantee you we haven't seen a speck of that coverage. So I just don't find it as a genuine criticism of Bill Clinton coming from a outlet for the news when there hasn't been anything like that coverage for the women as to whom Donald Trump, who are accusing him of misconduct.
Well, I think there's been plenty of coverage of that. But, Richard, we're going to have to leave it at that, unfortunately. Appreciate you joining us.
We always love having you, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on Rising, we're going to tell you about the DNC's very good, great, wonderful day, according to MSNBC, when Rising continues.